Hello, welcome back to in today's video, doing the GWV Sunday Round Up in today's video, or for today's video. So we're going to have a look at various things, have a look at the Arctic and North Atlantic oscillations. We'll have a look at what's going on in the stratosphere. We'll look at weather next week to 10 days as well. So we'll start off, however, by looking at what's happening on the sun with solar activity. So this is the solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net, and you can see that it is completely spotless again across the solar disk today. We haven't got any sunspots showing up at all, a completely clear solar disk in terms of sunspot activity today. This is regards whether it's solar tracker. This has been tracking solar activity on a daily basis since back in the summer. Our good friend James Ackrill has kept this updated for us over the past few months, and well, you can see that we have had now about 2 weeks of completely spotless conditions on the solar disk. So these little orange or red spots here indicate an individual day's sunspot numbers, and you can see that we had a bit of a spike at the start of March just there, but since then we've very much been trending without any sunspots at all. So these red spots just here, they're indicating around 2 weeks worth of completely spotless conditions on the sun. That means the trend lines are very much rapidly trending down at the moment. The thick green and thick orange lines there, they're all trending downwards. And I believe we have actually had our longest run of spotless conditions on the solar disk since back in April 2010. So that was at the start of the solar cycle, of course. We had a prolonged solar minimum from solar cycle 23 to 24. Around 2008, 2009, 2010. That coincided with all of those cold winters that we had between 2008 and 2010. And then, of course, we moved up into solar cycle 24. We had our double peak solar maximum. First peak occurred at the end of 2011. The second peak occurred at the end or at the start of 2014. Since when we have been trending down. We're going down into solar minimum now, and this is really indicative of what we're going to see over the next couple of years. We will see, by the time we get through to 2019, when solar minimum is due to occur, we'll probably see around a year's worth of very little solar activity at all. And this is telling us, this 2 weeks that we've had now and counting, of no sunspots, it's telling us that the sun is kind of going to sleep. It's nothing to be alarmed about. It is a natural 11-year cycle from minimum to maximum and back to minimum again. And then when we reach the minimum of solar cycle 24, which I say will be around 2019, we'll start to see the sun beginning to increase again as we move into the next solar cycle, which will be solar cycle 25. So you'll probably hear a lot in the papers over the next year or two about the sun going to sleep and how it might be introducing an ice age and that kind of thing. It's nothing to be overly alarmed about. It is a natural cycle that occurs on the sun. However, it is a weaker solar cycle that we've had, the solar cycle number 24. We know that it's about the weakest that we've had for over a century. We might see another very weak cycle for cycle 25. So this does increase our chance of colder winters, because when we have minimum sunspot activity, it increases the risk of northern blocking. The reasons aren't understood why that is the case, but it probably is related to the effect that solar activity has on the jet stream coming across the Atlantic. So it weakens the jet stream, and consequently you tend to get more northern blocking. So when you're around solar minimum, we appear to increase the chance in Europe anyway. It's less the connection for America and Asia, but for Europe we appear to increase the chance around solar minimum of getting colder winters via northern blocking, and that's the case. It had very weak solar cycles such as we've had with solar cycle 24. Anyway, our longest run of spotless conditions on the sun, 2 weeks now and counting since April 2010. Obviously, we'll keep you posted. James has also updated this. This is the comparison between solar cycle 12 and 24. Solar cycle 12 was the old solar cycle back in the 1800s, running from 1878 to 1890. And these two solar cycles, number 12 and the current solar cycle, number 24, they've been running very closely to one another in terms of the way we moved up from solar minimum, which is just here, to solar maximum just here, but double peak solar maximum of both the solar cycles occurred with the second peak. Interestingly, normally in a typical solar cycle, the first peak maximum will be stronger than the second peak, but these two solar cycles, 12 and 24, did it differently. And then, of course, moving out of solar maximum back down into solar minimum have been running very closely again. So this is where we are right now in terms of solar cycle 24, the current solar cycle. And you see that we are again trending very much along the same lines as solar cycle number 12. And you see that number 12 was all the way downhill from this point on into solar minimum, and you will expect and almost certainly see the same from solar cycle number 24 as well. Big thanks to James for updating those for us. Right, the Arctic oscillation is looking like this. It's positive with the AO at the moment, and it's forecast to stay that way. So this is the Arctic oscillation observed and forecast chart. We can go right the way back into the start of a winter just here with this chart. The black line here tells us where the Arctic oscillation has been. Red lines at the end where the Arctic oscillation is forecast to go. Remember, the Arctic oscillation doesn't drive anything, it's just an index that tells you what the atmosphere is doing over the Arctic. So around the start of the winter, almost on the turn of the month, from November to December, we went positive with the Arctic oscillation, and we pretty much stayed positive with the Arctic oscillation throughout the winter. So we did get a period there around the start of February of negativity of the AO. That came just after the big stratospheric warming that we had at the end of January. Whether the two were connected, it's impossible to say. But overall, we can see that this winter has been a positive Arctic oscillation winter, or it was a positive Arctic oscillation winter, and we continue this into the spring as well. So this is where we are right now, very much positive with the AO. And whilst the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic oscillation to trend downwards, generally it is still staying positive. Now, normally the Arctic oscillation runs in blocks of sort of 3-4 months. So, and we can see we've had that in terms of positive conditions with the Arctic oscillation over the past few months. So starting from December, going to March, even into April, generally the trend with the AO has been to have it positive, which is sort of low pressure over the pole and a distinct lack of northern blocking. Now, any time around now, I would have thought we're likely to get a change to negativity of the Arctic oscillation. It's possible we won't, but it's been a long run now of positive conditions with the Arctic oscillation. I suspect that within the next couple of months we're likely to go negative with this. We may have a run of 3 or 4 months of negative conditions over the North Pole. Now, this is going to take us into the summer, of course. Let's say the Arctic oscillation goes negative sometime in April or May, and we get 3 or 4 months of negativity of the Arctic oscillation. That will take us well into summer. It will take us to July, possibly even to August. And a negative Arctic oscillation in the summer is never very good, because what tends to happen is you get a block over the pole in the summer, you'll tend to get an area of low pressure, a trough, underneath it. So when you have blocking in the summer over the pole, it tends to actually be a signal for poor summer conditions. I'm just wondering whether the flip to negative Arctic oscillation is going to, but I would assume is coming quite quickly, because we've had a long run of positive Arctic oscillation condition. I'm just wondering whether that might actually coincide with a deterioration in the pattern for summer. Doesn't necessarily mean we will get that change to a negative Arctic oscillation, but it could be something to watch out for. North Atlantic oscillation is very similar, and just as with the Arctic Oscillation, again, this chart is telling us where the North Atlantic Oscillation has been and where the red lines at the end, the GFS ensembles are forecasting the North Atlantic Oscillation to go. Remember, again, this doesn't drive anything, it just tells you what the atmosphere is doing. And very similar with the Arctic Oscillation through the last few months. The black line here tells us that we've generally been trending positive with the North Atlantic Oscillation. So back in December, neutral to negative, but from around the middle of December onwards, Christmas onwards, this peak just here took us into a positive North Atlantic Oscillation type setup. And that really continued through the remainder of the winter then. This is where we are right now in the middle of March. Still positive with the North Atlantic Oscillation, and the GFS ensembles are forecasting that the North Atlantic Oscillation will be staying positive. So everything really between the indexes, the Arctic Oscillation, the North Atlantic Oscillation, it's all set up the westerlies, if you like, and that's the reason we have had so far a very mild March, following on from a very mild winter, and there's no sign of anything really changing from that broad situation. But of course, as you go further into spring, westerlies aren't as mild as they are in winter and at the start of spring. This is how the stratospheric temperature is looking over the North Pole at 30 HPA. We've had another warming in the past few days, although we are beginning to trend downwards now with the temperature. There's the big stratospheric warming that occurred at the end of January. I don't think it quite reached the threshold of a sudden stratospheric warming, but it was a major warming event, and soon afterwards, early February, we did try to get it colder. It didn't really come to a lot, although many parts of Europe were pushed into the freezer, but we never really had that cold air into Western Europe. And since then, really, the temperature at 30 HPA over North Pole has tended to be warmer than average. The grey line here is the trend, the trend line, and you can see we've generally been above trend with those temperatures at 30 HPA, but it's not been enough to push us into blocked conditions and set up cold weather this year. At 10 HPA, which is a bit further up, we look like this. So again, been quite warm really since the major warming that occurred at the start of January into the beginning of February. At the moment, we're about average at 10 HPA, where you would expect us to be. We're very close to the grey line. So about average where you'd expect to be in terms of those temperatures at 10 HPA in the stratosphere over North Pole in the middle part of March. This is how the GFS is predicting things to go in terms of those stratospheric temperatures. So you see we've got a lot of blue there across the North Pole at the moment. It isn't deep blue, it's light blue, which indicates that the temperature is about average. It is a warming time now. From now through to the summer, the temperatures at 10 HPA will warm up. So we're about average at the moment. Let's see what the GFS is predicting to happen over the next couple of weeks. And we get a bit of a cooling occurring there around Scandinavia up towards Svalbard. But nothing overly dramatic. And as we go through into the extended part of the GFS, which takes us into April, we again keep things generally about average in terms of those stratospheric temperatures. So there's no sign of a sudden stratospheric warming to end the season, no sign of the polar vortex being killed, as happened last year, by a major warming event. We just keep the temperature around average over the next couple of weeks in terms of the stratosphere. So there's nothing really to suggest that we're going to find northern blocking properly setting up as we go through into April. Although, as I say, I am expecting the Arctic Oscillation to begin to trend negative quite soon, because it's had a long run now of positivity of the Arctic Oscillation. I'm expecting at any time we might find it going negative, which would be happening because we get northern blocking starting to appear. Let's hope that doesn't happen as we run up towards summer. Right, these are GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next 2 weeks. The red line here is the 30-year temperature average, significantly above average at the moment. However, we have got some colder weather coming up over the coming weeks. So from around, say, Tuesday to Friday, it's looking like, excuse me, looking like we're going to get a colder spell of weather Doesn't last all that long though. Let's go into next weekend and then the final days of March, we're going above average once again. So it might have a fairly warmish end to March. However, there are a few cold outlier members appearing there. So we have got a lot of scatter for this final stage of March, which is just here, and into April. A lot of scatter there. So perhaps best to leave that alone. I think the general idea is mild at the moment, colder in the next few days, and then over the weekend instead of next week, probably going milder again. However, that might be associated with night frost. Got some precipitation coming up as well, so there's going to be quite a lot of wet weather actually across England and Wales tomorrow, and then again another band of heavy rain on Wednesday, and that's introducing this colder air that's occurring just here. We might see some wintry weather up in the north, and I'll perhaps update the blog about that tonight. There is a risk of some snow actually in the north, not in the south, but in the north later in the coming week. Temperature anomaly for the next week, this go from the 19th through to the 27th of March. That's coming out a bit colder than average, not just for the UK, but for many western parts of Europe. The temperature anomaly is dropping a little bit. Precipitation anomalies for the next week, 19th, 27th of March, they're looking close to average. In America, we're beginning to lose those very cold conditions that we've had in the east of the states. So the temperature anomaly there. It's still colder than average in the east of the states for the next week, the 19th, 27th of March, but it's beginning to become less cold. Besides the temperature picking up, looks really quite warm out in the Midwest. In the far Pacific Northwest, though, it's beginning to go colder again. And precipitation anomalies look like this. Dry in the east, but look at this, it's turning wetter again out in the west. They really have broken a drought in the west of the states, particularly in California, where it's been pretty devastating over the past 3 or 4 years in terms of drought. They've really broken that over the past few months. It's more what you expect to see in an El Nino event, really. And we've actually had a weak La Nina this winter, but in any case, they've really broken the drought in California. It looks like they've got more heavy rain to come, with significantly wetter than average precipitation anomalies in the west of the states for the next week. This is how the pattern looks in America at the moment. So we've got a ridge coming down through the central part of the state, still hanging on to the cold air in the east of America with this northeasterly wind. And then you notice pressure is starting to weaken out in the west. As we run through into the middle part of the coming week, there's all the low pressure just there that's associated with that very wet weather coming out of the Pacific onto the west coast of America. Meanwhile, we've got this ridge extending through the Midwest of America, keeping it mainly dry there, and another push of cold air is actually coming out of Canada into the east and the northeast of the states through the middle part of the week. That scenario continues into Thursday, and there's your upper air temperatures for Thursday, showing a lot of cold air in the far east and northeast of America. So another plunge of really quite severely cold air coming to the east of the states. In central western areas, though, it is significantly milder or warmer with those upper air temperatures. At the end of the coming week, this high pressure drifts over towards the Atlantic, and we start to pull up milder air from the Gulf of Mexico. So things turning rapidly milder at the end of the week and into next weekend across the east of the states. Still lots of low pressure, though, out in the west just here, bringing no doubt more copious amounts of rain into that Pacific side of America. There's the upper air temperature showing much warmer air pushing up out of the Gulf of Mexico into the east of the states, so it will be warming up significantly in the east of America at the end of the coming week and into next weekend. Meanwhile, out in the west, associated with all that low pressure from the Pacific, it's actually a bit colder than you would expect out in the west of America. And for central parts of America, still more or less hanging on to that ridge of high pressure. If you're watching from America and you'd like to know more about the weather in the States, do let me know, and I'll be happy to have a go at doing some forecasts for America over the coming few months. Right, coming back to home finally, and this is how things are looking on Tuesday. Low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. That's looking quite unsettled. There'll be cold air coming into the north, so showers will turn increasingly wintry, I think, in the north on Tuesday. Wednesday brings this area of low pressure down across the country, and that's introducing a northerly. So it's going to take a band of heavy rain across the country Tuesday into Wednesday, followed by cold air from the north. And then into Thursday, we're in a northerly. That could be producing... It'll certainly be producing snow showers for Scotland. There's a possibility of a potential for a few wintry surprises elsewhere around Wednesday, Thursday. I will update the blog, I think, tonight just to bring you up to date on that, because I haven't really got time to go through it in detail for today's video. The end of the week, that low pressure will get out of the way and we build this ridge in from the Atlantic. So that will settle things down, but it's within quite cold air, so I think the risk at the end of the week will be more towards frost. So of course we're going towards the end of March now. That's Friday 24th of March, and frost at this point of the year can be really quite damaging. So farmers and gardeners, watch out. I think we will have some potentially quite significant frost coming up under this area of high pressure at the end of the week and into next weekend. It won't feel too bad by day because the sun is getting a lot of strength to it now. So under this ridge next weekend, I think that'll be very pleasant by day with a decent amount of sunshine. But by night, I think that could be really quite damagingly cold. Damaging in terms of the time of year. I mean, we're talking about minimums of -2, -3, -4, so nothing to be overly alarmed about in terms of how low the temperature's going, but just damaging because of the time of year. There's a lot going on with wildlife and in the gardens at the moment, so next weekend, watch out for frost. And then into the final days of March, we keep this area of high pressure close to the country. So we're going back to very settled conditions as we've had really since the winter, probably back into the autumn as well. And then right at the extended range, this takes us to Wednesday, 29th of March. Just hints from the GFS of a little bit of retrogression. Notice this area of high pressure we start on Sunday. It's over top of the UK. We move to Monday. You see it's going up towards Scotland. To Tuesday, it's going out to the west of Ireland, and then we get through into Wednesday, and then we get through to Wednesday and we find that high pressure is going out further towards Greenland. So we're very close to putting down a cold northerly wind there at the very end of the month. Doesn't quite come off on this particular run of the GFS, but whenever you see retrogression, which is where high pressure is going from west to east as opposed to the typical zonal flow, which is where high pressure, I should say, the retrogression is going from east to west, as opposed to the typical zonal flow, which is west to east. Whenever you see that, you have to be alert for pulling down cold air from the north. As I say, it doesn't quite do it on this run of the GFS, but that could be something to watch out for as we're moving into the start of April, perhaps. ECWF, finally, we've got this area of low pressure across the country through the middle part of the week. We'll bring quite a bit of rain Tuesday to Wednesday, and then a surge of colder air from the north. There's the northerly wind as we go through into Thursday. That could be bringing wintry showers to the north and the east of the country. Again, I'll update the blog later on today in terms of the wintry potential later this week. Then high pressure reaches back in off the Atlantic at the end of the week, settling things down, but it will be quite cold. There's a risk of night frost, and that continues into the weekend. Lots of high pressure going on through the weekend, so a lot of dry weather coming up next weekend. And as I say, by day, probably not feeling too bad in the sun, but by night, watch out for frost. Particularly for the north and the south, there's a bit of an easterly wind, which will probably hold temperatures up by night. And then into the closing days of March, which takes us to Wednesday, 29th, day 10. Still the high pressure over Scandinavia. What the ECM wants to do is bring up low pressure from off the continent. That will probably bring less cold air with it, but there would be a risk of some quite hard overnight frost in the north. And the south, you will probably get outbreaks of rain coming up from the southeast. So there's a lot to keep an eye on over the coming week. We're going to get some quite wet weather tomorrow for England and Wales, then another band of rain Tuesday, Wednesday. After that, the wind goes into the north, and I think we're going to have a bit of a colder snap around the middle part of the week. There is wintry potential for the north with that. Come back to the blog later for more on that. And then we get through to the end of the week. High pressure builds across the country, settling things down. Watch out for hard overnight frost, could be quite damaging. And then by day, mostly dry, not feeling too bad in the sunshine. Towards the end of March, start of April, possibly hints of a little bit of retrogression there, which might turn things a bit colder, perhaps again, for the start of April. Right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.